In the annals of history, few names shine as brightly as Winston Churchill. A man of many contradictions, he was a soldier, a statesman, a writer, and an orator whose words could inspire a nation. Winston Leonard Spencer Churchill was born on November 30th, 1874, in Oxfordshire, England, at the opulent Blenheim Palace. He was born into an aristocratic family, the son of Lord Randolph Churchill, a charismatic politician, and Jenny Jerome, a beautiful American socialite. Churchill's early education at Harrow School was marked by a rebellious spirit and academic struggles, but it was at the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst where he truly found his footing. Graduating 8th in his class, he embarked on a military career that would take him to some of the most dangerous parts of the British Empire. As a young officer, Churchill's assignments took him to Cuba, India, Sudan, and South Africa. It was during these postings that he also began his career as a war correspondent, writing dispatches that brought the realities of imperial conflict into British living rooms. In 1895, Churchill was posted to Cuba as an observer. His love for Cuban cigars would be evident until his death. Fame came Churchill's way when he was captured by the Boers during the Second Boer War in the Natal Midlands after a troop train was derailed. Imprisoned in Pretoria, he managed to escape and return to Durban. In 1900, Churchill entered the world of politics as a conservative, but disillusioned with his party's stance on free trade, he crossed the floor to join the Liberals. Churchill's rapid rise saw him holding several key positions, including Home Secretary and First Lord of the Admiralty. Winston and Clementine Ogilvie Hosier were married at St. Margaret's Church, Westminster, on September 12, 1908, after a very brief engagement. Churchill's ambitious vision was not without its failures. In 1915, he championed the Gallipoli Campaign, a bold but ill-fated attempt to force Turkey out of World War I by capturing the Dardanelles. The campaign ended in disaster, with heavy Allied casualties, and Churchill was forced to resign. Despite the setback, Churchill remained undeterred. He re-entered the political arena, taking on roles such as Minister of Munitions, Secretary of State for War, and Secretary of State for Air, showcasing his resilience and ability to reinvent himself. The 1930s were challenging for Churchill. As Europe faced the growing threat of fascism, Churchill found himself sidelined. He spent these wilderness years warning about the dangers of Nazi Germany, but his warnings fell on deaf ears. In 1940, as Nazi Germany's war machine swept through Europe, Winston Churchill was called upon to lead Britain as Prime Minister. His stirring oratory and steadfast resolve became the backbone of British resistance. Churchill was to convene a coalition cabinet composed of both Labour and Conservative members. Churchill created and assumed the position of Minister of Defence. At the end of May of 1940, the French army was in decline, and British troops were in retreat at Dunkirk. Lord Halifax, the Foreign Secretary, favoured a negotiated ceasefire with Hitler. Churchill resolved to fight on. On the 4th of June, 1940, some 338,226 Allied servicemen were evacuated from Dunkirk. Churchill responded by delivering his famous "We shall fight on the beaches" speech, essentially framing the defeat as a victory to rally Britain and its people. The battle for Britain was imminent. Churchill ordered the Western Desert Campaign on the 11th of June in response to the Italian declaration of war. September 1940 saw Germany change its tactics with Britain. Instead of attacking air bases, the Luftwaffe started the Blitz on London. This allowed the RAF to recover and gave Churchill confidence that Britain could win the war.
Bombs fell alike on the homes of the East End poor and the Mayfair rich, on shops.
Churchill, realizing that Britain was in dire need of resources, negotiated with Roosevelt to bring into being the U.S. Lend-Lease Act. The U.S. would provide military and material aid to allies, but left to Roosevelt's discretion what he should ask in return. Churchill, aware of Hitler's plans to invade Russia, tried in vain to warn Stalin. Stalin, the steel dictator, simply didn't trust Churchill. Operation Barbarossa commenced on the 22nd of June, 1941. In August 1941, Churchill, along with Roosevelt, issued the Atlantic Charter, which essentially discussed a post-war Europe. The US had not yet entered the war. This charter would be instrumental as a basis for the UN founded in 1945. December 1941, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. On the 8th of December, Churchill declared war on Japan. Again, Churchill seized the opportunity. He met again with Roosevelt at the Arcadia Conference, spanning December 1941 to January 1942. It was decided that Hitler was the biggest threat to peace, and so Europe should take precedence over the Pacific theater of war. On the 17th of June 1941, Roosevelt and Churchill agreed on Operation Torch, the defeat of the Axis in North Africa, as the necessary precursor to an invasion of Europe. Churchill obtained from America for the 8th Army in North Africa 300 Sherman tanks and 100 howitzers. November 1942, the British were victorious at El Alamein, defeating the German Afrika Korps. Churchill would deliver one of his most memorable speeches in London. This is not the end. It is not even the beginning of the end, but it is perhaps the end of the beginning. December 1943, Churchill and Roosevelt met Stalin in the first of the Big Three meetings at the Tehran Conference. Roosevelt and Stalin persuaded Churchill to commit to the opening of a second front in Western Europe, and it was agreed Germany would be divided among them after the war. 1944. The Allies had been planning Operation Overlord. On the 6th of June, 1944, D-Day, nearly 160,000 troops crossed the English Channel to Normandy. On the 7th of May, 1945, the Allies accepted Germany's surrender. Churchill went to Whitehall, where he addressed a large crowd. Victory was his. With the end of the war, Churchill's coalition government collapsed. Churchill resigned on the 23rd of May, 1945. Later that same day, by invitation of the King, George VI, Churchill set about creating a caretaker government. In July 1945, the British voted. The Labour Party under Clement Attlee won the popular vote. 1945 to 1951, Churchill was the leader of the opposition Conservative Party. In the 1951 elections, Churchill's Conservative Party lost the popular vote, but took power based on majority of parliamentary seats. Churchill was 77 years of age. He retired in April 1955 and was succeeded by Anthony Eden. Winston Churchill passed away on January 24, 1965, at the age of 90. His state funeral was one of the largest in history, attended by world leaders and dignitaries who came to honor the man who stood as a bulwark against tyranny. Churchill's legacy endures not only in the annals of history, but in the principles he stood for: courage, determination, and the unyielding defense of freedom. His life was a testament to the power of words and the strength of will. Winston Churchill, the man who defined an era, remains a beacon of leadership for generations to come.